Hi guys, my name is Catherine Pabon. I am your host of Z Files Podcast. Today we're doing Behind the Ballot. Today we have a special guest, Tara Vecchio-Freeman.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yes. So would you like to just introduce yourself a little bit, why you're here, and what are you running for?
Sure. So my name is Tara Vecchio-Freeman. I'm here because I am running for the Smithfield Township Supervisor position in the upcoming municipal election. And I am a bipartisan candidate. I'm running to inject a much-needed dose of common sense, good judgment, and reasonableness across parties in our local government and across different ideologies.
Yeah. So with the current positions, the people who are currently in position, do you feel like the job's not being done? Is that why you have like this boost of confidence and this urgency to run for this position now?
I feel like, unfortunately, in our local government, we have a lot of corruption going on, and I want to be effective in cleaning up that corruption.
Yeah. Would you be able to go into like some of the corruption that you feel like is going on?
Sure. So, I mean, to put it blankly, the current chair of the Board of Supervisors, he ran when he was in the election in 2019 and won. And he took a job at a local politician's office, knowing that he was going to be taking that job, and then won the supervisor position. He decided, instead of resigning from one of those roles, after he endured some criticism for that, it's conflict of interest, it's an ethics conflict, that instead of resigning from either of those roles, that he chose to kind of hunker down. He decided that he was going to fire some longtime employees from the township that has occurred over time, and he has then brought in political friends. So he's kind of built a fortress in our township, and it's not really like a local township government anymore. It's kind of a fortress for him. And at
like a hierarchy.
Kind of. There's no outside opinions coming in. They're not focused on what's important for the residents.
Yeah.
It's very political, unfortunately.
Not representing the community.
Correct. And I think coming in as a bipartisan candidate, when you're bipartisan, you need to have a sense of rationality and doing what's in the best interest of the constituents that you serve. So with that in mind, they're not doing that. For instance, there are a lot of expensive salaries that are being paid for. There's excessive projects and things like that, a lot of grant matching happening, and that all costs money. So when the money ran out, he hiked our taxes. And it's been seen over the last 5 years that there's a 218.8% increase overall in our taxes for the municipal property taxes. And
for him to raise the taxes because all the money ran out, do we see where that money has went to, or would you say that the Poconos, the Smithfield Township, is profiting off of it? Did it go to the community and what we're kind of paying taxes for?
So in 2024, for that tax year, they sent out basically a letter, and it said that this is where your taxes went to. And according to that letter, they said that the prior Board of Supervisors was focused on saving money and paying off a bond that the township had. And they didn't put money toward fixing equipment or making replacements of equipment. So,
and they had said that they would.
Instead of paying for making replacements and repairs of equipment and things, they kind of put that to the side and they focused on paying off this bond, this debt.
Yeah.
So essentially what this board is claiming, per this letter, is that they needed to establish a capital improvements fund to basically get new equipment. They wanted a loader and a skid steer. They also wanted to bring, maintenance of the equipment in-house, things like that. But they also wanted to increase money for grants, that they apply for. A lot of those grants have a match, so they wanted to create a grant fund as well. They had other things listed like personnel, which was the salaries I was talking about.
Yeah.
Some of those salaries are double, if not triple, what the prior person was making who was in that position. Yeah. Things like increasing, their environmental stewardship and their parks and recreation budget, their presence on social media and other platforms like that. So they said that basically the money in 2024 went to those things.
Right.
So primarily a capital improvements fund and a grants fund as well. Do I see the majority of the residents benefiting from those things? No. No, I don't. I think, unfortunately, a lot of the needs of the residents are being ignored. And when people have issues, like let's say with permits or zoning issues, it's really difficult for them to get things resolved. Right. So if there was money being spent that was actually benefiting the residents and providing a lot of services, I see, for instance, I've attended meetings for Middle Smithfield, which is right down the road. They have a lot of festivals and events that are open to the public, and a lot of community involvement. And I see community frustration in my township, and it's really disheartening.
Yeah. So for some of the budget things that the money had went to, like parks and recreational, would you say that is something that the residents of like the Poconos, Smithfield is in the Poconos, would benefit from, considering like our tourism, our environmental focus and priority, like especially with tourism and businesses around here?
Sure. I mean, the Poconos is the tourism capital. You know what I mean? That's what we were known for. We were known for honeymoons and heart-shaped tubs and, beautiful landscapes. As someone who was born and raised here, basically I have witnessed the township change over time. And with that, we've seen a lot of growth and development. There's also a lot of people that are coming and using our parks that are not from the area. We've had a lot of damage, unfortunately, to our parks. And with that, basically, we've had, especially along the river at the Menacing Fields, for instance, and the River's Edge Bike Park, we've had so much trash that they've actually had to have the Public Works Department come in, bring machines down to the river, and pull the trash out. So in a beautiful, actually, pristine river, it's really saddening to see that. So we have a lot of people coming from out of the area who are using the parks. And that influx of people has actually caused our township to implement a fee, which they didn't have before. So now it's $10, I believe, per person that's an out-of-county resident. So
would you say that's fair? Or?
To be honest, I think it deters people from coming and trashing the parks. If they're going to come and spend the money, I would hope that they would take care of the area.
To pick it up and everything.
Correct, while they're in it. But the big thing is, they've done some surveys and things, and a lot of locals aren't going to the parks. I do have, friends that have small children that go and they utilize the parks. But many times the influx of people that you see is not from the area.
Just being overcrowded, you think?
There's a lot of people that utilize, and they come right off the highway. For instance, the Menacing Fields and the River's Edge Bike Park, that issue I think is because that's right off the highway. And even with the $10 per person, it's probably cheaper than driving up to Smithfield Beach, let's say, paying that fee and putting in. So I believe in conservation. I think that there are a lot of areas that we can conserve and leave as natural or green space, that we don't have to turn everything into a park. Because surveys that they've done have shown that a lot of local residents really aren't using them. And that people who are coming from out of the area using them, we've had issues like having to implement people basically at the entrances to collect fees, and we have
it's more disadvantages, you would feel.
I think they can definitely make it a little bit better, encourage the residents to come more, but again, not everything has to become a park.
So if you became supervisor for May 20th primary elections, what are some incentives that you would do differently?
I think having more transparency in our local government is huge. As residents, we basically asked at one of the meetings last year if, when they're approving spending, for instance, if they can let us know basically what that general fund amount is. They would just say general fund X amount of dollars. We don't know what they're approving
It's pretty
bills
discreet.
for.
Yeah.
Correct. So we asked for some financial transparency,
Yeah.
and essentially now they provide us with an expense sheet. They show us what each item is, and then if you have questions, you can ask. So I think that's encouraging.
That's such a big thing, transparency. Like every interview I've had, like so many people are talking about that, like the lack of transparency.
Well, it's a way for people, if people aren't able to ask questions, they can continue doing what they're doing kind of in the shadows behind the scenes without people saying, hey, what's going on here? So essentially, we had them now provide us with those expense sheets, but then we noticed in the budgeting for 2025, unlike previous years, they are now using roll-up totals for salaries. So again, there's a lot of longtime township employees that have been let go, new employees are being hired, and now they're trying to kind of mask what they're paying people. Now, they know that government salaries, you can look them up online. So there are ways to find that information out, but it's another way that they are, trying to kind of hide by giving you a roll-up total instead of breaking out salaries so you can see what individual people are making in different positions.
Would you say like the new hires are from a lack of efficiency from the long-time hires, like the long-time previous employees?
I think maybe some of them are performance related.
Yeah.
I work in human resources, and they remind me at the meetings that they cannot discuss personnel matters, which I'm very familiar with. And essentially, there may be some that are performance related. Others are new positions that were created. So, like I said, the current chair kind of brought friends in that he may have worked with at other townships or went to school with or had relationships with. Correct.
Right. So with like your previous experiences, how would you feel that you would bring the best to the table for this position,
Sure.
supervisor?
So I'll give you a little background about myself because I didn't do that in the beginning. So I would like to share that so they can kind of get to know me.
Yeah, of course. This is all so that they could get to know you. So whatever you want to advertise, like, it's all for you.
So I'm a lifetime Monroe County resident. I have lived in Smithfield Township for over 30 years. And I went to Notre Dame High School right up the road at, in East Stroudsburg, and I graduated from ESU in 2014.
Yay.
Yeah, fellow ESU student. I have a degree in business with concentrations in business management and accounting, and I'm proud to say I graduated summa cum laude, which was a nice achievement for me. I've worked as a human resources professional for almost a decade. And I not only live and own a home in Smithfield Township, but I also work there. So, I live with my husband. We have a wonderful rescue dog. My husband is a blue-collar guy. I work in we like to call green collar. I work in the landscape industry. So I'm very familiar with, people who are working people, and as a working professional, I think it's really important to understand where different people are coming from. I'm not a career politician by any means. This is my first foray into politics. And like I said, I felt that it was really important to kind of get a seat on the other side of the table and help clean up the corruption.
I mean, living here, working here, like growing up here, like this is clearly important to you.
Yeah, so my grandparents came here in the late 50s. They came here from Brooklyn.
Oh wow, it's a long time.
yeah, they came right after the 55 flood, actually, a few years after. And they started businesses as soon as they got here. So my family has been, in business for many, many years. And I grew up in that family business. I learned what a strong work ethic is. I learned that, your reputation, as my grandfather says, is your most important asset. And I've learned working in human resources and with the accounting background, I've learned budgeting. I am empathetic toward people. I provide a listening ear on a regular basis because that's what a lot of HR is, and helping people with problems. I'm very interested in learning, and I have a very, studious tendency about myself that I'm quick to pick things up. So I think I can definitely, from my experience, growing up in a family business, working as a professional, understanding, the larger demographic of people in our area and having that, personal tie for my whole life, that I can really bring a lot to the table.
Would you say your biggest asset is bringing a business mindset towards the table?
I think, honestly, besides having a business background, it's the fact that I consider myself somewhat of a centrist. So I like to say, I use my personal judgment and reason instead of, picking one party over another with making decisions. I want to be bipartisan, and I think being able to hear, understand, be pragmatic about interpreting what people are telling you needs to be done and using that information to make a good decision that's going to benefit the constituents as a whole is really important.
Yeah. So you would be really essentially running on like a Republican ticket, but would you say that because you're saying it's bipartisan, that when you're actually a supervisor, that is something that you want to adhere to?
Yes. So there are studies that show that 78% of all Americans get their political affiliation from their parents.
Yeah, like a generational.
Yep. So I'm a generational Republican. However, like I said, I consider myself more of a centrist. So I like to use, my own judgment, follow my own opinions, my thoughts, and not let one party over another govern what I'm going to do. So I think that basically, I can use that to my advantage. And, I will not let party influence my decisions. Right now, the Board of Supervisors is made up of 3 people of the same party. And like I said, I want to come in, I want to inject, good judgment, reason, common sense, new perspective. Yes, absolutely. And I think that there's not going to be any change that can happen if we just continue with the same mindset on the board that's been happening.
So like, as a centrist, like being able to, right now, the supervisors, it would be 3 Democrats, right? So you would feel it's important that it's shifted, that it's like everyone's voices and different perspectives would be in there, and you could be able to provide that?
Yeah, I definitely think, I don't want to say shifted per se, but I think putting party politics aside and focusing more on the needs of the constituents.
Because community politics is very separate from like federal politics.
Yeah, and the issues I'm focusing on, we're not focusing on national issues like abortion and immigration and things like that. We're focusing on taxation, creation of ordinances, development, zoning, things like that. And people don't realize that, they think, oh, I only need to go out and vote in the presidential election because that's the most important. And, you'll hear a lot of people say local government is so important.
It's the foundation of the federal government.
And actually, being a township supervisor, it's kind of like the lowest form of of government, right? It's the most close to you. There's no separation between you and the supervisors.
Really access and like talk to about your problems.
Correct. Yes, and they should be listening to everyone and everybody's concerns within their township.
And then, as past experience or current being HR, you have a very good listening ear, you would say?
Yes. Honestly, I tell people, 90% of what I do is, providing a safe space and a listening ear for people.
Can you walk us through your plans for budgeting and how you would prioritize township spending? Because clearly it's been a very critical issue for you with the rise of the taxes currently.
So I think that there's, many steps to approach this. And I think the first one is fiscal transparency. So we talked about that already. Figuring out, what salaries are at, because this year going in, we don't really know where everybody's at. I think maybe doing some salary surveys and finding out, compared to other townships, are we paying for different positions, what other townships of a similar size and, that are second-class townships like we are, are those pay rates basically in range? And that's something that I do as an HR professional. We do salary surveys all the time. So taking a look at salaries, taking a look at spending in general, especially on things like grants. So, our township manager, she is, from what I hear, a fantastic grant writer. And that's wonderful, and I think that that's a great talent that she has. What a lot of people don't understand, though, is many of these grants, they'll say, we got a $50,000 planning grant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, $25,000 of that is free money, and $25,000 is a match that we have to put in.
Mm.
So many, residents think, oh, we got $50,000 to put toward this project, but you really only got half of it.
Yeah.
Correct. And sometimes it can be, a match in cash that you have to provide, and that comes out of the general fund, which essentially comes from our taxes. But also there's things like in-kind contribution as well, which can be done through labor. So I think prioritizing what types of grants we need. Just because a grant is available doesn't mean we need to go after it unless we really need that piece of equipment or to do that project, for instance. Right. So looking at salaries, looking at grants, and I think really, if we can get a handle on the spending, we can help, decrease that tax over time for people.
Yeah, and that would be great. So for Smithfield, you have mentioned the residents here, that their needs and like the majority of them aren't being represented properly right now. How would you describe that? How would you describe the needs are for the residents currently? Like, what would you say is not being met? What would you say is something that can happen that you would like to put forth?
Sure. I think a lot of what residents need is somebody to listen to them. If they have questions, call them back, send an email back. Respond.
Yeah.
If they ask a question at a meeting, don't yell at them. Don't berate them. Don't call them out.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, there's many instances of that happening.
Wow.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of residents too that have issues and they don't get resolved, and they have to get an attorney involved and sue the township.
That's crazy.
So,
and that's money in the township that's going to be wasted. Like,
correct.
And it could have been avoided.
Correct. I mean, they have to pay their solicitor, sometimes settles or goes to court or whatever the course of action may be. But then you create that animosity because that resident had to go out, had to get an attorney, go through the rigmarole of the legal process. Right. When something could be as simple as following up or forming a course of action. So there's a lot of residents recently that are calling to speak with people, and they're just not getting back to them. So they're having to go in the office.
They just won't get voted in.
Well, sometimes they have 6-year terms.
Yeah, so you would have to wait.
You would have to wait.
Yeah, it's unfair.
Quite a bit of time.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate.
And it's frustrating to the residents. There's not a lot of us that go to meetings, but
there's not. Like sometimes, like for news reporting, I have to go to some meetings, not necessarily like Smithfield, but like other townships and everything, and no one's there.
No, and I think people only come to meetings sometimes if they have an issue.
Yeah,
or
specifically.
Yes, or they hear about a project that might impact maybe where they live.
Yeah.
Or something that they see on the agenda or on Facebook that comes up. But I think really, if people want to have their concerns addressed, go to the meeting, voice your opinion, make an issue, and hopefully they will answer your question when you're there.
What is your vision for development and zoning in this area?
Sure.
There's been a lot of progress that's been happening.
Yes. So in Smithfield Township, like I said, I grew up there. It looks significantly different.
Yeah, it does.
From when I was a child.
Yeah, I grew up in the same area. Yeah.
Yeah. So then you totally understand.
Yeah.
So essentially, I believe that yes, we do have to have development, right? We need to have jobs. We need to have places for people to go to work.
The local economy.
Yes, we need to grow our local economy, establish places of business. However, I do think that we can do that in a really smart way. As I said earlier, I believe in conserving land as well. We are known in the Poconos for having these beautiful scenic views.
Like the Poconos.
Yes.
That's just the name. You just imagine grass.
Yeah, you think, woodsy and outdoors and trees and wildlife. And unfortunately, we're seeing less and less of that.
Yeah.
And we're getting more built up. We've had an influx of population, so we need places for people to live. So homes need to be built. And also people in this area need jobs. We need stores, we need medical services.
There should be sections like for that.
Yes.
That's
So
where zoning would come in, right?
yes, absolutely. So there's something that they just created in Smithfield Township called an ED, or an economic development zone. That's where Smithfield Gateway is, where the Wawa and the Dairy Queen and all that is, for instance. So I personally think, we need to have those ED zones, and we need to be smart about where we're putting them. Right behind that, is residential. I don't know if people moved in there thinking, hey, I'm going to be looking at the back of this giant complex.
I actually know someone that used to live in that area, and before, St. Luke's, right? St. Luke's was built, they had to leave because they bought the area. They wanted to buy the area, so it was like a negotiation of if they wanted to, take the money and leave. But yeah, they did not expect it to be built there. But it is on the highway, so I guess that would be an area that businesses would be than residential.
Yeah, I mean, so there is that development back there, but you're right, it is a prime location. You come right off the highway at the Marshalls Creek exit, and you're right on that
and
main
then
drag
Alaska
there.
Pizza's down there, and other businesses like the strip mall and everything.
Yep. So I mean, it is a prime location. Like the person that you knew, I don't think it's what people thought was going to happen, considering that used to be a dairy farm at one point, and then it was just open land for a really long time. But I think we can be smart, encourage people to come in and develop so we can grow and create jobs. But also we need to be mindful of what areas do we need to conserve, and what is going to best benefit our residents as well. So.
And that's something that you want to bring to the table, making sure that there's conservation and that there's residents' priorities with where businesses will be built and et cetera.
Absolutely. I mean, there is a new special exception ordinance that they're putting in place. And basically, right now somebody can come in, they pay a fee, they apply for a special exception in a zone that might not be an economic development zone, and they can then essentially get approved. So now they are creating a new ordinance to actually have a process, an application process that people have to go through. I think that's really smart on the township's behalf.
So you support that?
Yes, so I applaud them for that, for creating, an outline of rules through this ordinance that people, can't just put the money down and say, thank you, I'm going to go do my project. They have to, go through the process, which I think provides kind of a little bit of a layer of protection versus having development in areas where it really shouldn't be, or maybe we'll support you putting a restaurant there, but we don't want a medical facility there, for instance. So it makes it a lot more thoughtful and smart.
And now, to kind of end it off, why should people vote for you?
Sure.
If you had to wrap it all up with everything we talked about, if a voter was right in front of you, I guess I
you're my voter.
Why should the audience vote for you?
Sure. So like I said, I'm a bipartisan candidate. I am here to, do what's best for the residents. I am not being driven by opinions of one party versus another. I'm very pragmatic. I go through a process when making decisions. And like I said, I'm a homeowner. In the township, I work in the township. I have strong family ties to the township. I want to do what's best for people that live in the township.
And then you're not even a longtime politician, so really everything is just important to you, in terms of compassion for the community.
Yes, absolutely.
And then actually I did want to ask also, this is your first time running for a position, how does it feel? What has been your experience running?
Sure. I'll be honest with you, there's not a handbook, so it's been a very interesting process. I tell people it's been a labor of love. It is a lot of time, a lot of energy.
I understand that.
Yes, time, energy, money. But I have to say it's been such a labor of love, and I'm enjoying every second. I am acquiring a ton of new skills. I've met a lot of amazing people.
New support and everything.
Yes, having the support. I have a great team behind me. I have a bipartisan campaign team, and I cannot thank them enough for, all the help that they give me. But getting to know the residents, talking with business owners, finding out what's really important to them in our community, I think has really helped with dealing with some of the stress and the craziness that goes with the campaign. Absolutely, it's what they keep me going, because I know that I'm doing something greater than myself. I'm doing something for our community as a whole.
That's amazing. Is there anything else you would like to add before?
Sure. So I encourage everybody to get out and vote. The primary is going to be May 20th, and that is a closed primary. So you either have to be registered as a Democrat or Republican to vote in the primary election. And then November 4th is going to be the general election. Anybody can come out, whether they're Democrat, Republican, independent, unaffiliated. I encourage everybody to get out and vote, and know that, it's just as important, if not more important, to go out and vote in your local election, because, that is what affects you every day.
Your daily issues is local.
Correct, yes. And also, just as a shameless plug, you can find me on Facebook at Elect Tara, and online, and my website is electtara.com.
My name is Catherine Pavone. Today we had a special guest, Tara Vecchio-Freeman. Thank you so much for joining us for Behind the Ballot and allowing us to really get an inside look of your campaign and insights about why you're running and everything that you would like to do if you win supervisor for Smithfield Township.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was truly a pleasure.
It was great having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.